Hi, everybody. This is Vladimira Kuna, and I love interviewing authors really passionately to help you to understand through the energy and the words of the authors about their message, because that's what we do. When you're an author, you're actually bringing your message to the world because you're absolutely passionate about it. And I've got amazing Doug Dane here, who has published the book Mistaken Identity. I love the name, so I would love to welcome him. And we know each other through working in our beautiful industry. And I absolutely love the message he has. And the intention is to eradicate judgment, which really caught my attention because judgment is our biggest problem, I'd say, separation and judgment. And there is not a person in this world who would not benefit from his book. Welcome, Doug. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Nice to be here. How are you?
I'm really good, thank you. Are you well?
I'm great. Really good. Yeah. I'm alive. I'm smiling. Life is good.
That's fantastic. What made you choose the title Mistaken Identity? It's really intriguing.
You know, it's funny. I was looking back after I'd started writing the book, which didn't take very long. I started writing it last fall. I was looking back over old journals, and for years I have been using this term with people, mistaken identity, because I meet you and I sit down and I talk to you and I find out where you're at and your challenge in life and what you're trying to do or where you're trying to get to. And everybody I met, and I've talked to thousands of people, everybody I met, they were mistaken about how they saw themselves. They were mistaken about some things that they believed about themselves or about, things that they were brought up to believe or whatever. And I go, man, oh man, everybody's got this mistaken view on themselves, a mistaken opinion. And anyway, I looked through my journal and I'd written down the words mistaken identity 8 years ago. I never wanted to write a book. I had no intention to write a book. My mentor, Bob Proctor, going, when are you going to write a book? When are you going to write a book? And my story came out in the newspaper and on television. When are you going to write a book? I never wanted to really write a book, but there was a message that was formulating in me because of all these people I was talking to. And I'm seeing all these people struggle. And so, yeah, it just that's kind of where it started. And then I just kept sort of talking about it over these last 8 years as I was working with people and mentoring people. And it just that's kind of how I was born, I guess.
That is amazing. I love what you said because it's such an important point for how much we grow and how much we actually know how we want to help people by providing service and really doing the work and seeing the struggles. And like when I started reading your book, and when I thought letting go was actually the strongest message that Bob gave me when he laser coached me, and he said, write this down, and I still have it next to my desk.
Right.
It's letting go. And that really tightly goes to what you're talking about, because we think things are happening and we just have to live the life the way we are if we're struggling. And I see people, and there are so many people who are really not internally happy, not satisfied. They can't believe, or they don't believe themselves, or they say, well, I'm not, who am I to write a book? Who am I to do this? Who am I to? So what would you say is the start actually for people to realize that is the reason why they really struggle and unhappy? How do you actually explain, or how could you actually advise people?
Well, I think people need to understand the resistance and the conflict that's going on inside of them. So a lot of people, and I think everybody to some degree or another at certain points in their life, different seasons of their life, have conflict. I was talking to a gentleman yesterday, and he's in real conflict, and I said, listen, you're being pulled in one direction, which is towards the positive polarity. If you think of like the law of polarity, law of opposites, you're being pulled towards something good. You want to do this, and you want to improve your life, and you're being pulled to that. You can't. It's like a magnetic pull, right? It's like gravity. It's like you're pulled towards it. But by law, you're also pulled to the negative. And in this case, he was Christian, and we were talking about, the enemy. I call it, if you're in psychology, we call it ego or false self. And there's always a pull in two different directions. Now, we don't like the conflict. We don't like the feeling it gives us, right? We're anxious, we're tense, we're angry, whatever the feeling that comes out of that tension. But we have to understand what that tension and conflict is. There's a great Neil Donald Walsh. Some of you, of course, have heard of him. He wrote all these books called Conversations with God, and in one of his books, he calls it sieving. He said it's not a word. I made it up. It's called sieving, and he said basically what happens is, I had to read this a bunch of times to get it, but he goes, you conceive of an idea. An idea is conceived in your mind, and as soon as an idea is conceived, if it's a positive idea, that the negative has to be there too. It's automatic, right? It has to be the positive and negative. And he said, basically, this idea that you conceive, the way that you receive it, you end up deceiving yourself. In other words, talking yourself out of it. And he says, you deceive the idea that you receive because of how you perceive what you conceive. And anyway, his point was that we're pulled to want to do something like this book. I mean, there was a message in me, and I have this story that I endured that turned into a very dark story turned into a beautiful story, and it helps the people. But there's all this tension on me, and so what we have to do is we have to learn. As I've been taught. Bob Proctor said it all the time. You need to learn, unlearn, and relearn. So we need to learn, and that's what my book does, is get you to learn, what is this mistaken identity? Why are you seeing yourself the way you see yourself, and why are other people seeing you a different way? A lot of people actually see you very good. They see all the good in you, and they try to tell you you're not very comfortable with that. And so we can learn why we feel that way, and then we have to unlearn all the things that we're learned when we were little, that were drilled into us, that's creating this conflict. And so I just say, I think most people are stuck in an emotional prison of their own making. It's a case of a mistaken identity. The real villain is your upbringing, and now the social system and mental health system and social media, different things that keep you stuck. And then the key to your freedom really lies inside of you. If you would just take the time to understand who you are, why you see yourself the way you do, what is wrong with what you see or what you believe, and then you can change it. Because for the most part, you are who you think you are because of what you were programmed to be. And so if I was programmed to be this, that, or the other thing, or you were programmed to believe certain things, then the last part, the relearn, I can reprogram myself, and I can install new beliefs and new ideas, and I can live by my own rules, not man-made rules made up by other people that are constantly friggin' changing.
I love what you said. I absolutely love, because people put themselves in a prison, and there is the story which I'm sure you've heard, but I like the story. And actually, Abraham and Esther Hicks were talking about this, when she said, we dig the hole for ourselves, we fall in that, we keep falling into that hole we dig for ourselves, and then we get out and we pat ourselves on our back going, well done, you've made it out, whereas we don't even have to be there.
Right.
And that's what you're saying. Like, I've actually interviewed Neil Donald Walsh, and I love his books, and I actually studied the Conversations with God with him as well. And that's why it really impacted me as well, the word judgment. And that's what your whole message is. And he said the problem is separation and judgment as well. Because we just judge, but why do we judge? And people don't even find out. Sometimes they just think they're this victim. They have to live in the victimhood of, oh, but I'm not privileged to be that, and I don't have enough money to. It's easy for you to create that. Oh, it's easy for you to say. And that brings me to a message where you said, I went through so many struggles to actually get, and now you can help people. Because how can someone help someone if you don't go through it and you actually understand? Right. So what would you say was the biggest struggle for you? Or what was the light? Let's look at the positive ending, which is, what was the light that really made you realize that all these struggles were actually something that you perhaps experienced for you to be able to help everybody really with this amazing message and the way you teach?
I think it came in 3 stages for me. In 2001, so I was 39 years old, turning 40, I guess. And I'd always struggled in relationships. Early on, my early 20s, I figured out how to become successful financially. And it looked like I had it all together. I was doing really well and earning money, and I was able to live a good lifestyle. I looked like a happy guy, but I wasn't. I was good at acting like a happy guy. And all my relationships would fail. And, I was intelligent enough to succeed in business and intelligent enough to look at myself and going, all right, your way is not working. Like, why do you keep making these mistakes? So anyway, I ended up in separation counseling when my marriage had failed. And this story of violent trauma and abuse, childhood abuse, emotional abuse, physical abuse, sexual abuse, all this abuse came out in this counseling. It was all blocked out. And so I decided, for me anyway, that the best thing for me to do was to tell the truth, because I was brought up as a liar. I was taught to lie as a child inside that violent home. I lied to the police. I lied to teachers. I lied to family to keep the secrets hidden. And I was lying in my relationships. And every other area of my life, I was honest. I had honesty and integrity, but I was in this conflict because I wasn't being in integrity in relationships. And anyway, so the story came out. I went public with it. It was in the national newspaper. Then it was on television. And then people started asking me to speak about it and tell the story. And so that was a big turning point. And so when the story came out, I understood why I felt so lousy about myself for all those years. I couldn't explain it. Right? I was anxious, depressed, thoughts of suicide, really uncomfortable with people, nervous, all these physical and emotional symptoms. And I just thought, what the hell's wrong with me? What's wrong with me? I never got an answer. I could not figure out what was wrong with me. I'm asking the counselors and therapists, what the hell's wrong with me? They couldn't figure it out. Anyway, so that was one. And then, so that was 2001. And then 2014. So, 12, 13 years later, I've had this story out. I'm speaking about it, and people were coming to me and they were going, Doug, how did you go from that to where you are now? Because I'd let the whole story go. I had no negative feelings towards it, no judgment towards the people that abused me. I really looked upon the story as a gift. It really was a gift, because now I was able to help people, right? But I couldn't transfer how I did it. When you said, how did you do it? Like, I know what I did, but I couldn't transfer it to you so you could let go of whatever your story was and your pain. And so in 2014, I met Bob Proctor, and I was at a little event, 14 people in a room for a weekend, and you sat on a stool with them. And it was called the hot seat. And I went down to that event in Los Angeles because I wanted to take my story out to the public and try to help them go from where I was, to where what I was able to do. Because statistically at the time, it's still there, 50 to 60% of adults suffer from some form of adverse childhood experiences, abuse, trauma, whatever it is. And they of course were seeking me out. And my heart was just yearning to be able to help them, because I couldn't help them in the way I wanted to. I mean, I could help them, but not to get them from this to that, Anyway, I started working with Bob, and he said, well, why don't you come work for me? And so I started working with him and for him. I worked with him for 8 years, and he worked on me, and he kept saying, Doug, so we became friends, and he knew the story, and he said, Doug, just let it go. And I said, Bob, it's not that easy. He goes, okay, whatever you say, Doug. I go, no, Bob, you don't understand. Like you didn't go through what I went through. I mean, you had a rough life and depression era, all that stuff, but you didn't go, you don't really understand. Okay, Doug, whatever you say. And he was very patient and non-judgmental. He was one of the first people that I met that really um, demonstrated just acceptance of people, seeing the good in people, not judging people, and he didn't judge me, and he was very patient with me, but he saw something in me that I felt I had, but I didn't believe in myself. And so he believed in me, and he nurtured me and encouraged me. And it's funny, because when I sat down to actually write the book, this is the third turning point. It was, I guess it would be passed, and
I'm listening.
Bob passed just over a year ago, and it would have been 2020, mid 2020, I guess. It finally clicked.
I don't understand.
Sorry, my Siri is making
But
noise
I passed
here.
a strawberry a year ago, and it would have been 2020, mid 2020. I guess it.
Sorry.
Okay, I found this on the web but I passed a strawberry a year ago, and it would have been 2020, mid
Okay, it's funny
2020.
actually.
Siri is making noise. Oh my gosh, I'll turn that off.
Interesting question.
I'm just talking away in an interview and Siri comes on. Sorry, people.
It's brilliant. Seriously. Everything's working in divine order,
Siri interrupts a lot.
It's reconnecting you to where you need to be.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So really, at that point, what I realized was that the process of letting go, what I perceived to be the complexity and the difficulty of letting go and changing how I saw myself, and releasing the struggles, I made it way too complicated. It took way too long, and I made it way too hard. And so then I was talking to people, and because Bob just said, Doug, this is so simple. You're making it so complicated. And he was right.
We all do.
we all do. And it's not our fault. It's just the way we were taught to learn. And our world is more complicated. It's perceived to be more complicated than ever because we have so much information coming at us from so many sources. But it came down to go, this is so simple. It doesn't have to be hard, and it can happen really quick. And so I wrote the book in a way that I wanted. So it's not a book that you read. I call it a handbook. It's a book that you experience, a book that you use. And I say, let the book work on you. Follow the book and let the book work on you. And so I was having these conversations, and people were transforming and letting stuff go like lightning fast, because what they did is they did what Bob asked me to do that I wouldn't do originally, that I finally did. He said, Doug, not much is going to change unless and until you can be open and accept the idea that it is simple and it doesn't have to be hard, and you can let it go. And then as soon as I changed my mind around that and accepted that idea, so now what I try to do when I talk about it, I try to get you to accept the idea that this is not difficult. It can happen really fast. I don't care how old you are. I'm 59. It took me 57 years. And I'm on a mission just to plead with people. Don't waste your life, trying to figure this out when it could be really easy. So,
this is one of the things which is, I would say, the key for people to realize we really believe in struggle. Like, there are so many people, they just believe in struggle. And it is, like you said, it's easy. It is so easy. And, obviously working similarly as you and similar, I mean, not the same, but I mean, I went through my challenges and struggles, and going through it is really easy to let go. But how we hold on to it thinking, oh, like this victimhood, this what you're actually talking, mistaken identity, we think we have to work hard to make money, whatever beliefs we actually created in a childhood with the perception we had at that time.
right.
It's kind of drawing and rolling all the way to now. I love what you said, that how it changed for you when you actually came out of hiding. And I'd like actually all of you who was listening, think about, how do you feel, or what are you hiding? I'm sure everybody can actually cut to the point, like, what am I hiding? And I love, even when you were talking about it was hard to come out and actually tell the story. I think that's when the shift happens, because we think, how are other people? It's this approval thing where we think, well, what are people going to think about me when I come out with this story? And I can't, I mean, my family, what are my friends going to think of me? And we have this emotional tug of war going, I'd love to do it because we know from within it's right thing to do. And yet, like you said, something's really holding us back. It's that tug of war going, oh, do I want to do it? But how freeing is it? I love listening to you. It just shows how much freedom and how much the limitations, or as you started talking about the prison, we put ourselves into a prison. Like, how can we actually release? There are no bars holding us. It's us who just create the bars around ourselves.
Yeah, listen, I think first off, we have to understand this whole notion of judgment. So when we were little, we were judged. We watched the adults judging other people. So they would talk behind people's backs. They would criticize and judge people. And they judged each other. Our parents would judge each other and judge our siblings. And when it began for us, it began when they started drilling, rules and right and wrong and values and all these beliefs into us. And a lot of children, I think a high percentage of children, to some degree or another, more severe, like in my case, you were really judged if you didn't follow the rules. If you didn't get things right, you were punished. You were punished or criticized or made to feel small. And so very early on, you were judged. And then from that, you learned to judge yourself at a very young age. You were judging whether you were good or bad, whether you were following the rules or not. And so you just learned to judge. And then you went to school and you started developing friendship. And then you started judging your friends. Everybody was doing it, right? And so we grow up with this judgment. And judgment creates a real conflict inside, because at the nature of who we are as humans, we're filled with love and integrity. And judgment is out of integrity. And so whenever you operate or act out of integrity or not in integrity, it creates an inner conflict. Now, you're not aware of that. You don't understand that that's what it's doing or that's what's going on. But this inner conflict begins to grow. And listen, you could come from the best family in the world, great parents, but they, it's not their fault. They just did what they did, but they judged you too. They didn't really know you. And so they just drill in to you what they think is right and wrong for you, trying to help you do well and get off to a good start in life. So that's the really beginning of it. And then we have a view on ourselves. We have an opinion of ourselves. We go through life, and we have these mistaken beliefs about ourselves and these limiting beliefs and these judgments towards ourselves of what we can and can't do. But again, remember, there's that pull on us. God places this desire on our heart. We're here for a reason, and that pull is there. But then we avoid it, or we stay away from it, or we minimize it. That creates more conflict inside, because now we're judging ourselves that we're not pursuing what we want, right? And then these days, especially more so in the past, certainly with the advent of social media, this victim mentality has been perpetuated, because we've moved into this poor me thing, because we don't like how it feels, as I said, and it shows up in our physical state, and we go, what's wrong with me? And then if you go ask anybody what's wrong with you, then, well, you need therapy, or maybe you need medication, or, maybe whatever it is. We never, ever question that maybe what's wrong is what we believe. Maybe what's wrong is what we watched or what we were taught when we were kids. Maybe what's wrong is that we just have the wrong view of ourselves that's causing this conflict. But these days, it seems easier to be a victim, and being a victim is very convenient. Like I was a victim when I
agree.
Right? I was a victim when I was a child. Okay. But I'm 59. Right? I'm no longer a victim. I'm an adult. I've been an adult for a long time. I've had no physical or emotional risks since I was, 15 years old. I live here in Canada and New York. When I walk out of my house, there's no risk of me getting hurt. I don't have to, I don't have to protect myself. I don't have to protect my emotions, but that's what we've been taught to do, right?
Yes.
So we're very defensive because we don't like the feeling, that conflict that's inside. And so we go with the victim mentality, and then sometimes victims become villains,
Yeah.
And
it's so true. And it's also leading to self-sabotaging. I like when Peggy talks about how we self-sabotage ourselves, because everything you just said is leading us to that talk, which is really a one core thing. I'm not good enough. And it comes to self-love. And actually, before I done my transformation, and maybe you can speak to it with your book, I remember the hardest thing was actually to say I love you into a mirror, to come to the point where I could help other people, I could teach things. But when it came to the point where you can just stand there and own it and say, I'm the highest, truest, most authentic version of myself, and I just love, and I don't have to be apologetic to other people because this is what's right for me. And it doesn't necessarily mean that took some work. And like you said, actually it comes to letting go as well. So it's so important what you're talking about, because that self-sabotaging and victimhood is actually keeping us in that, pulling us back and away from where we would love to go. And, like you said, there's always the desire that is pulling us back. And maybe dissatisfaction pushing us from the back, because we also sometimes get more inspired when we're dissatisfied. And it is for each of us to ask, am I really truly happy and satisfied with the way I'm living the life? And I think every time we have to go back to childhood. I actually, in fact, think every single one of us childhood's patterns are one of the most important.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's a few other dynamics that go on that cause people some problems in that, though. So very few people understand mindset, and I hear people go mindset. Everybody's talking about mindset. Google mindset, you get a million hits and a million opinions on mindset. Very few people understand mindset. Mindset is actually setting your mind and running your mind properly. Your mind is a machine. Okay, that was proven back in the 50s and 60s. You're the operator of the machine, and your mind directs and controls your brain and your nervous system. Now, not a lot of people know that. I didn't know that, right? But when I figured it out, I realized I can take control of my thinking. One of the problems with going backwards in the past is that we can stay stuck in the past. So from a mindset perspective, the proper use of your mind is not looking backwards, not worrying about the future, but operating within the moment, just reacting and responding as you go through the day and go through your life. So I think there's information back there. Like for me, when I pieced the story together that had been all blocked out and that was in the newspaper and television, it explained a lot, right? But then what happened is and Bob was saying, Doug, just stop talking about it, stop thinking about it, just let it go. And then I was spending too much time looking back at the story, which basically put me back there with all my mistakes. And last night, for example, I was just relaxing on the couch, and I had a memory that came up that normally in the past, that memory would have triggered some emotion. But it was just a memory, like a cloud that passed by. I didn't get stuck, right? But so I think it's important that you do kind of take a look, gather some information to learn and unlearn part, to learn, all right, what is it that I believe? Where did I get this from? Why do I operate the way that I operate? What beliefs do I have? That's good. Now, the other problem is there is two major pressures that we grew up with that just is bigger than ever, in my opinion. And that is conformity and judgment. So we were taught, we have a compulsion to conformity. We want to conform. If we didn't conform, we were punished if we didn't conform. And so there's a pressure to conform. Social media just pushes that pressure to conform. And then, of course, we have a fear of criticism because of judgment. And so we're very worried what people will think. And so even if you do, like in my case, I had the story, it explained a lot. I was developing my mindset and awareness. I was becoming more aware, more in control of my thinking, but still 8 years it took me to write the book, right? Because of that conformity and judgment piece that I was, as you said, I was afraid to speak up and speak out. And what are people gonna think? And that is something we definitely, that's a decision we have to make. That and I just started just affirming. Like, I remember sitting with Bob, and I was talking about something, and I said to myself, I'm kind of worried about what you think, Bob. He looked me square in the eye. He goes, what the hell would you worry about what I'm thinking? He goes, I don't give a crap what you think about me. He said, why would you care what I think about you? He said, don't do that. And that was permission for me. And from then on, I just go, that's it. I don't care what anybody thinks about me, because they're not anyway.
But it is such an important part. We do worry, and that really, the decision making is the key. And if people are making decisions from the doubt and worry vibration, where they just fear, it's not going to go the way they'd love to go.
That's right.
I love what you talked about, excuse me, the letting go. Would you say it's really showing how when we get emotionally detached from the past, and we just kind of look back as an example to kind of take it as a learning lesson, as you said, you appreciate the lessons because that's what actually made you who you are. It's the process of who you became in the process. And letting go is the part. We actually stay emotionally attached. And that's why I watch people. They say, oh, they put so much emotions into what happened to them that they're creating more of it. And they don't realize that the little shift into a vision of something they absolutely love, it's like creating a new world. But people somehow, what do you think? Would you actually say that is the pattern from the childhood that brings you keep looking back at that horrible stuff that happened and feeling sorry for ourselves?
Yeah, one of the chapters in the book is called "Grow Up." So I had to grow up. I think most of us are basically children walking around in adult bodies, and that was me for sure. And so I never really kind of grew up, and one of the reasons I needed to grow up is because I was letting my emotions run my life, my thinking. All right, I'd have these childlike responses. I'd get sad. I would get angry. I had feelings of futility. Poor me. And I was acting like a child, literally. And when I made mistakes in my life, I had like childlike excuses. And one of my mentors, she said, Doug, you're going to have to parent this young boy. And so this young boy that went through this really dark story, I just started to parent him because he was acting out, and it wasn't serving my life. I wasn't doing as well as I could be doing. And so what I realized, another turning point for me was, I realized I was a kid that struggled. And then I turned into an adult that struggled. And then I was meeting other adults that were struggling, that were raising kids that were struggling. And then my daughter came along, and I made up my mind, I'm not going to be a parent that struggles and raise a kid that struggles. So that was a defining moment for sure for me. And so I just made my mind up that I got to grow up. And I love what you said. We've got to learn two things. It's called emotional neutrality and intellectual objectivity. All right. And so one of the chapters in the book is called The Elephant in the Room. Our emotions are like an elephant, right? And left untamed, they can trample a village. They can cause all kinds of damage. They can really hurt people. But that same elephant can be controlled and tamed with a stick. And I'm the rider of the elephant. And if I'm in control of the elephant, we can do good work. And so I made my mind up because my emotions were running out of control, right? My life was out of control in some areas. So I just made my mind up that I'm going to tame my emotions. And then I've been gifted with an intellect. And an adult approach would be to be objective. So I became objective about my story. I became objective about my problems. I use my intellect. So I don't respond emotionally. People go, how did you calm down so much? Why are you never get angry? You never get frustrated. Not much really bothers you. And I made my mind up that I was just going to not let my emotions control my thinking. And then I would be objective, and I would think, and I'd look at a situation, and most of the situations and all the situations in my past, there's nothing to be angry about. There's nothing to be sad about. There's, like I'm living here in a beautiful home in North Canada. I go down to New York and I live down there, and there's nothing that I should be upset about. Do I have problems? Yes. Listen, life is not hard. Okay. Life is actually very, very simple. It operates precisely according to laws of nature. It's very simple. Now, we all have problems, but it's how we approach our problems that makes life hard. So I have problems, but I approach them in an adult-like way, not in a childlike way. And so then my problems aren't that big. But some of you would say, I think everybody has problems. Just, people that maybe are more successful or more wealthy or whatever. Everybody has the same types of problems. The problems are just bigger relative to, and so we just got to change our I call it perception and judgment. Right. The last chapter in the book says it comes down to two things: perception and judgment. Every way you react is because of your perception of something. Your perception of you, your perception of somebody else, your perception of the world, your perception of your ideas, and you perceive things, and then you judge from that perception. Like Neil Donald Walsh, you deceive yourself because of how you perceive things.
Yes.
And so I just keep reminding myself, all right, how am I perceiving this situation? And that rules how I judge things. And so if you take this kind of approach, it's really easy to let it all go. Because it's not like people go, I'm struggling. I go, like Vlad, you come on, you go, oh, Doug, I'm really struggling. And I just look around your house, or I go, tell me about your life. I go, you're not struggling. I said, you want to see struggle? I'll take you somewhere else in the world and I'll introduce you to struggle. You're not struggling. Like, get some perspective, right? But
it's so true. It's so true. And I love how you but perception is critical. I love perception. It's really how we perceive it. And I remember when we went to backpack in Southeast Asia, nearly 20 years ago with my husband. We didn't even have kids. We just backpacked, and we were in these poorest areas of Cambodia and stuff. And they have these very muddy puddle, and there was a cow in the middle, child having a bath, and the woman was actually washing. And I thought, she can't even wash it in the water is filthy.
Right.
But living in Asia, I think it was my wake-up call for how I live, because whatever I do, I know that this is nowhere near a struggle. Right. Like you said, they sometimes just look, and it's the comparison, isn't it? When people start comparing themselves to someone who has more, but what is more? Again, it comes down to perception. So, but I love how you intertwine it with judgment. Yeah. It's like, it really comes like a twin brothers or sisters, we can say. And when they stay together, how you can actually be non-judgmental with changing the perception. So I like that. Well,
listen, I can look at this. Here's my book, right? So there's the front, and there's the back, right? There's the top, there's the bottom, there's the left, my left, and there's the right. Okay. And so when I look at anything, I have a choice of, I can choose the positive side of something or the negative side through my perception, my intellect. I choose how I perceive things. And based on that choice that I make is how I judge. And that's the response I create in me. Now, what a beautiful idea. Like, just think of the power that you have with those assets to be able to do that. Like, listen, if you look at my story, it's very, very dark, but I see it as a gift, right? In my book, somebody said, there's a part in the book where you say you're grateful for being adopted into that violent home. And I am very grateful for being dropped in that violent alcoholic home for two reasons, lots of reasons, but two main ones that are in the book. One is it gives me perspective because I could have been adopted into any family.
Yes.
Right. And if I was adopted into a different family now that I know and understand, I would have been a different person. I would have had a different mistaken identity. I would have made a different set of mistakes in my life, and I'd be in a different place. And the other gift in it is that I saved the life of a little boy. There could have been another little boy in that family that wouldn't have been able to survive like I did and thrive like I did. And so I saved another little boy, and I also did save the little boy that did live in that home. And that's perspective.
Yes.
And so I can live in conflict and victim and sadness and anxiety and depression, all the junk that goes along with my perception on that story, or I can look at it as a gift, and that's a choice.
All the greatest leaders I watch and masters and mentors and, all these great people we know, is actually the point where they say, this is how I look at the story. It's not about the story being better or worse. This is how, again, all of us perceive. So you're so right in this. It's just like, it kind of got me into thinking yesterday when I was talking to a friend, and she said, well, I'm ashamed of this. So that's another emotion, which is really on a lower vibration, how people, and they get it from childhood. And she actually was talking about something that happened to her when she was little. And she said, I still can't do these things and go with it because I'm still feeling this shame.
Right. But she's wrong.
Mm.
What she said is not true. I still can't do this because of this. Well, that's not true. She can.
Yeah.
So one of the chapters of the book is called You Should Be Ashamed, because I had a lot of shame, of course, and guilt because of what I went through. But then, of course, the mistakes I made because of what I went through. Mm-hmm. And people don't understand shame. So shame is a very useful emotion, but it's supposed to be temporary. Okay. Here, I just want to read every chapter has a quote that starts the chapter off, and then it finishes with a piece of scripture, because I just want people to, it's not about a religion. I want people to consider what God is saying to you or about you as it relates to the chapter. So 49, page 49. So I like looking up the definition of words, because it helps to give me perspective, right? Mm-hmm. Because we misuse words. So I looked up the word shame, a painful emotion caused by consciousness of guilt, shortcomings, or impropriety. Okay. And so it's an emotion caused by the consciousness of. So shame is useful. If I make a mistake, something that's wrong, I should feel shame, but just to bring my awareness to the consciousness of what I did. But I don't live with shame. You don't carry it around. It's like if you stub your toe, it really hurts, but it doesn't hurt for the rest of your life.
For the rest of your life, yeah.
It's a temporary.
It's a great analogy, because it's really painful for a very short time of the time, but it goes.
Yeah, and we let it go.
Yeah.
Right. But what we do, and listen, it's not your fault. If you're feeling shame or carrying shame, it wasn't my fault either. You were taught to do that, because the shame everybody does it. Vlad, you should be ashamed of yourself. I think people say that they should be ashamed. They're telling you should be ashamed. That's their shame, dumping it on your. So you just learned to carry around shame. It's like a coat you put on. You live with it. You don't have to live with it. You let it go.
Mm-hmm. It's such an important subject. It is such a great. Well, what would your final thought be? I would really encourage everyone. I mean, Doug, could you hold your book? Because I did order it, but it's not coming so fast to me. So have a look. It's Mistaken Identity. Doug is the author, speaker, mentor. And if you'd like to actually study with him, his book, and you can ask him any questions. He can explain, because that's how we grow. We actually need to change the perception of something we believe. And if you have someone who's actually understanding this is someone, follow someone with results. That's what I've learned from Peggy and Bob. And it's always, if people haven't gone through it, how can they help you to overcome something that actually haven't overcome themselves? So he really knows what he's talking about. He's been in this for many years. I mean, I've known that only probably 3 years, but still, you know, like, it's been my most powerful journey. And I love your book. It's really amazing. I think this is one of the most important subjects, which lots of people underestimate, how really fast we can turn things around when we have the awareness what's holding us back. And then we can obviously work on the affirmations and self-talk and all the stuff, because that's dealing with the effect. But going back to the cause and really, really dealing with the point where it started and changing the belief, replacing the paradigms, it is really the key to a happy and satisfying life. What would your final message for us be?
Well,
not final,
I think
that's not the right word, but
yeah, no. I think I'd want you to remember, you know, even get your pen out, jot down, you know, these 5 words. The first set of 3 is we need to learn, unlearn, and relearn. And that's what I designed the book to do. And the other 2 words would be perception and judgment. I open the book, the first chapter is called Stop Judging. In fact, the whole book should have just been about that. It's probably the most impactful chapter for people that go through the book. At least that's the feedback I'm getting. And I end the book, the prologue talks about this notion of perception and judgment. And so you just have to remember 3 other things. Is when you were little, whatever you endured, I think I've discovered, you know, a high percentage of the population of children, adults now, have endured some form of mistreatment or maltreatment when they were kids, whether it was abuse like me, or they just weren't treated nicely or kindly. And what that did is it created all kinds of problems for you, and you went through that, and then that created your mistaken identity. Okay, and for years you've been living with conflict, internal conflict, and it's caused you conflict in your life, and you keep thinking there's something wrong with you. And you keep asking yourself, what's wrong with me? What's wrong with me? I kept asking that, and I never got an answer, because I realized there was nothing wrong with me. What was wrong is what I believed. What I was wrong is what I went through. What is wrong is what I perceive myself to be. And that takes me to the 3rd stage, which is you suffer, and you have problems, and you let your emotions run your life and your thinking, and you give up on yourself, and you give up on life, and you just coast, which creates more conflict. And you can break free of all of that if you understand, what is this mistaken identity? How did you get it? What is yours? And then you can go, screw that. I'm gonna be myself, darn it. And that's what I try to do. So the book is designed to, you know, take you through. There's 30 chapters. They're very short. They're like 2 to 3 pages long. And I get you to read the chapter, and then I get you to take an action step. I ask you a question to uncover your mistaken identity. So I'm getting you to take a look at it and then create a new one. And so I think that's what we gotta get straight. I just want people to feel better about themselves, so they can live a better life, and then help other people do the same.
that's so true. It's so true. And it's up to you, people. You know, like I said to everybody, it's always your choice, because you always, always, always choose what you want to do. And decision, just decide, try. You know, like, I don't even like the word try, but actually go for it, because if you do something and make a decision, then you can make better decision from that. And every time you do a little baby steps, I like the saying, even baby steps take you to Everest. I mean, you can do quantum leap, but isn't it better to actually keep moving slower than actually going backwards? And this is one of the things. Sometimes people say, oh, but it would take a long time. What if it didn't? Again, it's just something you believe. And by actually changing your identity and understanding who you are and what you can do, that improves every single result and every area of the life. So that is really Amazing. Thank you so much, Doug, for joining us. I've really enjoyed this conversation. I'm sure I'm gonna come and see what more you talk about in your group. I can't wait to actually hold the physical book in my hands too. And is the book available on Amazon?
Yeah, it comes out, depends when you're listening to this, but it comes out April the 4th. It's available online everywhere, Amazon or wherever you are. It starts shipping that. And then in the book, you can get the book through me, through my website. If you go to dougdane.com, you can get it through there. And in the book,
I will post all Doug's links under the interview, so you guys can actually just click on it and get that.
Yeah. And when you get the book, in the introduction, I invite you to go through the book with me, and you can go to my website for that as well. That'll be open once the book comes out on April the 4th. So
fantastic. Thank you so much. Really appreciate everything. I'm really grateful for what you do and how much you impact the world as well, because this is such an important subject. Really is.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Okay, thanks everyone.